Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our continuation of education series that we have been doing with Magnet. Today is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a conversation with the CEO, Jayme Rahz. You'll get to hear from her on her experience about CMMC and what does it take to make this kind of decision and how should you go about it. If you're an IT leader, listen in closely. If you're on the business side, listen in closely in terms of what are some of the thought processes of a CEO in order to make a decision such as this. It's a very strategic and an important decision in terms of the growth of your business. So kind of the very high level agenda for today, we'll talk about Midway Swiss. What do they do, who they are, and what kind of work they have been performing, kind of the impact of COVID to Midway Swiss and how they were able to pivot, and why did they select CMMC as a key initiative? What was the experience like in terms of the journey and some of the challenges, and really talk about strategies and tactics available to small businesses on cutting costs, because this is a very very key area for a lot of small businesses. How do I make this affordable? Along this presentation, please feel free to send us any questions that you have at any time. This is a dialogue, so any question is on the table. It doesn't matter if it's IT or if it's financial related or just general how to set up the program. We'll try our best to answer those questions. If we don't have the answers, that's okay. We can send you material afterward. So with that, what I'd like to do is thank our sponsor, Magnet. Magnet has really helped us set this up and lifted up a lot of small businesses that we work with. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Joe from Magnet. Joe, if you could, sir, please tell us about Magnet, the role, and just your experience around cyber when working on these projects.
Yes, thanks, Max, and thank you everybody for joining. For those of you who don't know, Magnet is a not-for-profit consulting firm comprised of manufacturing experts who transform smart ideas into top and bottom line growth for the company. And the goal is to result in good jobs for our cities and counties. We work on some of the services we offer in our growth services, our top line growth, which includes topics like business growth strategy, marketing strategy and execution, and sales enablement. We also work on innovation and technology that involves working on engineering projects in products, processes, and automation. We do new product and process development, and we work a lot on incorporating new technologies into the manufacturing space. We also do a lot of work in bottom line efficiency, skills development, where we focus on job skills and cross training to promote standard course. And we do leadership and culture work and operational excellence. So I again want to thank Max and Jayme from Midway for being part of this webinar. And I see some some known names in the participants. So welcome to everybody who we've already talked to. And we look forward to getting feedback and seeing some of your questions. Thank you.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you so much, Joe. So with that, what I'd like to do is hand it over to Jayme. Jayme, tell us about your background, tell us about your company, and just tell us what Midway Swiss is all about, and then we'll get right into some of your experiences with CMMC. So, Jayme, share your insight.
Great, thanks for having me. First of all, my name is Jayme. I'm the CEO at Midway Swiss Turn. My background is actually in environmental health and safety. I graduated from Akron University many years ago, we'll say. So I was able to go out and see a lot of different industries, majority of them manufacturing, and really get a broad sense of the industry and learn quite a bit. The company was started by my father-in-law in the 1970s. When my husband came home from the Navy, he joined his father in working in a tool and die shop. Shortly after that, we purchased our first Swiss machine. It was a Citizen Swiss machine from a local supplier here. And that definitely changed the course of our business for the better. My brother-in-law then joined the business as well. He graduated with an engineering degree from Akron. And we started down this path of precision Swiss machining. It has its challenges like everything else does, but we're small, we're nimble, we're able to overcome most of those. We now have moved into a 10,000 square foot facility that houses 6 Swiss screw machines, all citizens and varying sizes, and all the supporting equipment that we need to run our business with it. We offer right now customer job shop. So we do custom parts. We make anything and everything as long as it can take a round bar stock, 1.25 inches or less in diameter. And we do almost any material. We work for a broad range of customers. We work with the defense base, some healthcare, plumbing, HVAC, automotive, electrical, hydraulic, engine components, oil and gas, you name it, we probably have a part out there. We had one that was for NASA that is now currently up at the space station. So we really enjoy what we do. We enjoy seeing all the different industries that we can impact with our machines.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jayme. So as you can see, right, a lot of these capabilities, you might relate it to your business. As a cybersecurity leader, technology leader, one of the things I had to do was really get familiar with the business that we're serving, because a lot of these custom Swiss turning machines and other kinds of machines isn't necessarily what a chief security officer generally is used to. So in order for us to serve the business, we really have to get acquainted with what the business is in order to fit a security strategy and an IT strategy within that. So with that, I want to share a little bit about my background, then we're going to get right into some of the areas such as impact of COVID on Midway Swiss. You probably have some of those impacts, and then really what the journey was like for Midway Swiss. So a little bit about Ignyte and myself. You've heard me talk on a lot of these different types of webinars conducted by Magnet or other MEPs. We're about a 45-person company. We've always been in the risk management business for the last 8 years or so. I personally started my journey in the US Air Force as a security specialist. Over time, started to become more of a risk management specialist, and we work across different verticals, defense, financial services, healthcare, and we are what's called a CMMC candidate, C3PAO, so still going through our final hurdles of getting the audit done and things like that, but we are an audit shop, we are a risk management firm, and we help out a lot of small businesses with these kinds of challenges. So that's a little bit about us and myself. So with that, let's do this. I'm going to actually close out this presentation and just really have a conversation between myself and Jayme, so we can start to understand what it's like to go through this as a CEO, and start to really understand the decision making that's needed. So Jayme, with that, tell us about, we had this COVID thing happen sometimes last year. A lot of manufacturers that I was talking to, they were freaking out, right? Point blank, they're like, we don't know what's going to happen. I supply to the airline industry. How did that impact you when COVID happened? Tell us about that. What was Midway Swiss going through when COVID happened?
Well, like everybody else, we were impacted and freaked out as well. That's nothing that we've ever been through or we're prepared to go through. I will say we're a small, very small. We have about 10 or less employees, so we're able to pivot pretty quickly. We are in manufacturing, so we were able to stay open during this, but we did have a lot less business. We utilized that time to really look at different strategies on how we want to grow through this. So every time we have any type of interruption in business, recession, anything like that, it's always different looking on the outside of it. When you come out of that, it's always a different playing field. So we were looking at things that could change post-pandemic, basically. One of our strategies was to look at the customer base or potential customer base that wasn't interrupted by this and is rarely interrupted by almost anything, and that is government work, DoD work, that kind of stuff. We had done some in the past, and we work with a lot of primes right now. So we really use that time to gear up towards being better able to win government work. through that, CMMC obviously became a big issue that we needed to address. I guess the silver lining of the pandemic, it gave us some extra time that we needed to really hit the CMMC hard so that we could kind of implement it as quick as possible and really be able to go after government work, DoD work with primes and the government if we choose to.
That's awesome, Jayme. That's I think, that's a key takeaway even for my business, right? Where we're able to step back and kind of look at where do we pivot and those kinds of things. One of the conversation you and I had separately, this is a benefit really for your organization. You faced no layoff, and even though the government work is too intensive, you started to find yourself. I think you mentioned, you didn't have any layoffs or anything like that, and you're able to reinvest. Tell us about that in terms of impact on your people, on your team, and positive or negative. Give us a little bit of insight into, what are some of the benefits of COVID, the upside of COVID, right? That happened to your organization.
Always try to look at the upside. So it wasn't planned this way, but we hired our first sales and marketing employee in March. I believe it was March. So that would be the March of the COVID hit and everything started to close down. We made the decision, even knowing that this was going to happen, to go ahead and bring him on board, which was risky, I would say, knowing that he couldn't go out and do sales or anything a typical salesman would do. What we did with that time instead was to really learn a lot about CMMC and just doing government work and prime work in general. So we watched a lot of the webinars, some by you, which is how we kind of got all hooked up here. But we just utilized the extra downtime that we found to train employees on new things, to cross-train, to implement new strategies, upgrade websites, just pretty much anything you can imagine to make sure that we were prepared for the busy time that we planned and anticipated would happen once everything kind of opened back up. And we're actually seeing that right now. It's probably about a month or so ago, things really started to loosen up, and now everybody is just slammed, and nobody has free machine time for weeks or months. So we wanted to be as prepared as possible for when this time happened, to have as many of our ducks in a row as we could with CMMC and other strategies as far as how we were going to come out the other side.
That's awesome, Jayme. Yeah, because CMMC, which we'll get to next, is a big investment. So it sounds like you reinvested a little bit of time and effort in sales, which helps you go after the primes and the subs, and at the same time you're taking care of some of their requirements. So tell me, let's start about CMMC. When you started to go after it and you were getting the training and just looking at PTAC and Ignyte and other kinds of options to get the help, why CMMC? What made it sense to do CMMC for Midway Swiss? And I think that's what a lot of leaders that we talk to, technology leaders, always ask for, is what will help my leadership understand that this is important. So from your perspective, tell us, why did you do CMMC and why did you choose to go on this journey?
Sure. Well, probably like most people, right at first, we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. Isn't necessarily for us. We don't do a lot of government work, or maybe we don't think we want to do. As we started exploring it more, what we found is CMMC is going to apply to anybody that even just has a little role in anything that has CUI or DoD or government type work. So when we looked at our customer base, there were quite a few of our customers that did government work. And when they send that work to us, then we're going to be required to follow those same requirements. We also saw from a small business standpoint, because of the scope and complexity of this project, there was probably going to be some small businesses that chose not to do it. So by us going through it, we'd be more competitive. We would be a small business that could get the set asides from the government for the small business work, because we are going to be CMMC certified. So There was a lot of reasons, but basically by not doing it, we felt like we were just closing out too much potential work is the bottom line.
That's excellent, Jayme. That's often what we sometimes hear, but sometimes we don't at all, because when we're talking to leaders on the IT side, the other side is the business leadership has to be informed if this is critical to business growth. And it sounds like for your business, it was absolutely a critical to business growth as you're trying to build out your relationships with the DoD and the prime, and just, you chose to make this investment to mature your organization.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So this, for us, for our company, this was not an IT decision that was made. It was definitely the owners and top level management that made this decision, and then it flowed down from there. While it is an IT program, so to speak, that's what we're looking at, cybersecurity. The decision itself is very much just a strategic business decision, much like an ISO program or any QA programs or anything like that. It's not so much when making the decision about the tech side of it. It is really looking to see what kind of business you want to have in the future, and these are the decisions that you need to make then to gain that, to be able to do that work.
Well, a common thing that a common question that comes across, Jayme, is this is from the CEO's perspective. They always ask me, well, now there are some CEOs that want to do this to grow the business, which is fantastic. There are some CEOs that really come to us and say, hey, it's great, but we've had some sort of a breach or some sort of a negative event, and now we want to take care of it from that perspective, right? We'll get into the actual journey or experience, but when you looked at the CMMC program, did you see any elements of it that could provide you business protection aspects of it, not just for the purpose of compliance, but it's really helping you mature your business and maybe helping you with internal processes, just protecting, your intellectual property, your pricing, your process, those kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about that. Did any of those things come to mind as you were trying to make this sort of decision on how to re-leverage this?
Oh, sure. I mean, we all get up in the morning and hear about all the breaches, especially recently, that have happened with our food systems and that kind of stuff. So we've always been aware that that data breaches, they can cost anybody on the supply chain a lot of money, time, effort, and worse sometimes with closing down businesses. I myself am not a tech person. So this program for me offered a way to make sure that we tightened everything up, to make sure that I was confident, knew that our customer base was safe, that our processes were safe, that all the information and everything that we have here was safe, because that was something that I wasn't real comfortable with before going through this procedure. I wasn't real comfortable with knowing for sure, is our network safe? Is this safe? What about our emails? It caused us to kind of tighten everything up a little bit and streamline things, which increased efficiency. So that's been a real good thing for us as well.
That's awesome. Fantastic, Jayme. So we do have some questions coming in. We'll hold some of those questions. So anybody that's on the line, please ask your questions away. And if we can get to them throughout this entire presentation, we will. But certainly towards the end, we got about 20 minutes more of conversation. Then after that, we're going to get right to some of these questions and things like that. So Jayme, let's dive into, you decided to, invest in your business. COVID had happened, and now you decided to, as one of the investments was sales, another is CMMC. So just broadly speaking, tell us about your CMMC journey. What was the experience like? And then also tell us, where are you along that journey, right? Because it is a journey, right? It's hard to get done. So tell us about your experience and what was that journey like?
Sure. Yeah, it's absolutely not something that you just say we're going to do and then a week later you're done. It's definitely a journey, and it's going to be a culture now at our business. It's a way of thinking and a way of doing things, not just a program that you throw on the shelf and say, yeah, there's the binder. We started the journey through some education that we were, watching because we had the extra time there for a bit. And what that allowed us to do is learn as much internally as we could. And we understood that we were definitely going to need some outside help with this. We don't have an IT department. We don't have an IT company that helps us. I recognized right away that this was a much larger project than I can just implement on my own. We started then to reach out to our local PTACs and MEPs to see if and what types of services could be available to us. Magnet was the one that was able to offer some just incredible support and help. And I would encourage any small, medium, any company that needs it to reach out to your local PTACs, MEPs, and Magnet and such, because there's just a wealth of information, especially on new programs like this that the government's instituting. Like everybody was kind of like, oh, we don't know how this is going to go. I was incredibly overwhelmed when we started our journey. I think that's probably an understatement. It was way outside of my my comfortable area in dealing with issues at work. Magnet then introduced us to Ignyte that helped us to kind of map out what this program is going to look like. And the beginning of it was the stuff I was most comfortable with. That is business decisions. Putting strategies in place, policies in place. How are we going to respond to things? How do we train our employees? Those kind of issues I was really good with. And that was an easy and almost seamless thing for us to do with Ignyte. We are now moving into more the tech phase. And I once again am finding myself a little overwhelmed because I don't know this stuff. But I have to say, working with Magnet and Ignyte, it's been like somebody holding our hand all the way through it. As overwhelmed as I felt once we actually got into doing it, we've had very few bumps in the roads. It's been a very smooth process. I feel like we actually know what's going on with things. So it's been pretty good.
That's fantastic, Jayme. So thank you for the vote of confidence there. But we always get questions around, so there's, by and large, most of the manufacturers that Magnet works with, and we try to help out, they're very small, meaning they usually, if they have an IT team, it's outsourced. And if they have IT leadership, that leader is just a team of one or one and a half, right? Maybe one or one and a half. So, so you not having a team, how we work through it is the process doesn't change, right? Whether we have one team member or multitudes of team members. Tell us about, right, as best as you can, regardless of if you have the team member or not, because we assign somebody to you as a team member. Tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you had to deal with, as much as you know about just CMMC. Cost is one of them, and we'll get to that question here in a minute because we really want to drill into that. But what are other kinds of struggles for you as a CEO when you just look at, something like cybersecurity maturity model, right? It just sounds kind of crazy, but help us understand from a CEO perspective, what are some of the struggles that you've had to deal with as a small business as you're going through this?
Sure. I think, there's been a few things. There's the cost, like you said, that we'll get to later. There's the fact that it's not a program that's just ever done. It's always going to be ongoing. Cybersecurity, there's new threats every day. There's new protocols we're going to have to put in. So recognizing that once we took the step to do this, that this was going to be an ongoing thing for us. It's just a new business practice that we have to adopt. So as far as a decision making, that was a big decision that we had to overcome and make, that once we did this, we're going to continue to do this. And we'll always have to devote time and resources to this program to keep it up and running and to make sure that it's working how it should. So that was kind of a big one for me, because it's just one new project for me to have to manage. From an implementation standpoint, it's always working with our employees. We have great employees, but now it's something else that you have to learn to implement and control what they do. So, how they use their laptops, not letting them use work stuff for personal. I mean, everybody at work checks a personal email or something every now and then, or shops on Amazon, I'm sure. So tightening all of that kind of stuff up and just changing the culture of the technology that we have at our shop and how we use it. So those were kind of big decisions as well. And probably also the programs and applications that we use. when we're looking at using different ERP systems or quoting system, which types do we want to use? Because those will greatly impact what our CMMC model is going to look like if we choose to use a purchased one that we have here at the shop or a cloud-based one. We were really fortunate to have already made the choice to use a cloud-based ERP. And then through the decision-making process, we chose also a cloud-based quoting software that we could use as well. And those turn out to be great decisions because we don't have to have security for them here on site.
So that's so one of the things for the audience, right? Generally, when we come into an organization, a lot of CIO kinds of decisions, they have to be intelligently made in order to make the CMMC journey pretty easy, right? And so system complexity, system sophistication, we don't know what we're getting into. One of the things that that we decided or we learned about Jayme's organization is somehow Jayme as a CEO has made a lot of these CIO decisions, making some of her systems not very complex. So you heard her mention things about cloud applications, ERP solutions. All of these things can lead to extreme amount of complexity for a small business. Doesn't matter if you're a 10-person shop or a 100,000 person shop globally. Complexity when you talk about ERP, your actual job quoting system, cost of goods sold, a lot of that is where FCI lives. So Jayme, I'm going to ask you this because I don't know how you accomplish this, but give us a peek into your mind on how you make decisions when it comes to selecting technology, because somehow you've been able to make these decisions, right, without us even being there, right? Because a lot of stuff has been implemented before we ever got there. So for IT leaders that are listening in and asking about streamlining of processes and sophistication of your systems, tell us about how you go about making these decisions without really having, a base IT knowledge, and somehow you've managed to kind of make your environment somewhat non-complex and much easier to manage.
Sure. Well, so a lot of the decisions for for our software that we used happened right as COVID was happening. So that was yet another way that COVID really flavored and kind of changed how we were doing business. We've used the same ERP software for probably 12 years now, and they, some number of years ago, started offering a cloud-based version, which I was very hesitant to do because I don't have an IT department and I'm not an IT person. So change is hard for me when we're talking about our technology. When COVID happened and we needed to start sending people home to work, it very quickly became apparent that we were going to need to use and utilize the ERP system that was cloud-based. So that really was kind of the tipping point for us in getting to this cloud-based ERP system. We chose the same company, so it was very seamless. I shouldn't have been so hesitant with that technology, but that showed us that cloud technology worked for us because it didn't create more IT problems that I had to deal with. All of those issues and technical then became our software and our server issues to deal with. Shortly after that, because that switch was so good, then we also made the choice to choose a quoting software that was also a cloud-based, and that they specifically were going after customers because they were ITAR compliant and also working towards CMMC. So, there was the complexity of it was there was COVID, and then there was I don't know IT stuff, and that really lent itself to getting a lot of these cloud-based systems, and it's really worked well for us.
That's fantastic. So what you're doing here, what we generally call this in our world is just build versus buy, right? Do I build the capacity internally, or do I buy this and do it much more smartly? And this applies to if you're on the IT side, or if you're on the leadership side. You could have the skills to do it as the IT leader, but that question is the same. Do I dedicate my time here, or do I dedicate it helping enable business? So that's fantastic. The other thing that I picked up on that's very interesting and good for us to acknowledge is when you're looking at these cloud solutions. Now cloud is not good for everybody. Everybody's business is different, because some IT leaders have already invested into an on-prem ERP, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But the key thing you mentioned is, hey, I looked at this quoting system and I looked if they're on ITAR, right? If they're complying with ITAR, or if they're on the journey to CMMC, right? So tell us a little bit about that in terms of when you're vetting out vendors, whether they're cloud, on-prem, what are some of the things you're asking them today to make sure that they're lining up with your business strategy, right? Because that's the key.
Right. So, I mean, we start like probably everybody would, and does this software or application or company meet our basic needs of, what we're doing? Are they an ERP system that can handle all of the functions that we want? Then when we were vetting them for cybersecurity, it was a lot of phone calls back and forth with, do you know what this is? Are you planning on implementing this and that kind of stuff? So it would be getting feedback from them as they were going through this process as we were. And then I think finally I would just do a lot of research. I would ask a lot of questions. I would call a lot of colleagues. I would look on the internet. And when I continuously would get pointed to the same company, I would know that they're definitely a contender for what we want. But it's really about asking a lot of questions. It's making the phone calls. It's doing the research. Is this a company that's growing with CMMC and other things that they need to, or have they stagnated and it's kind of the old school way? We were the old school way and we had to grow. So then we needed to look for vendors and suppliers that would do that with us.
Jayme, I think that's a key lesson here is asking a lot of questions, right? Because before you get into some sort of a relationship with somebody, you just want to make sure that they're not just selling you on something, they're actually publishing content, they're talking about it, they're solving the industry problem. And more importantly, it's who's asking the question, right? Well, I always encourage not just IT leadership or procurement leadership, have actual business leadership, maybe the sales team, because they're always committing things.
Right.
And somehow we got to deliver it, right?
Yep. And in our company, it was top level management, me as the CEO, and then our sales and marketing team, but our sales and marketing guy that made many of the decisions and really kind of chose that path for us. So, we had already committed as a company before IT ever got involved or thought about it. It was really the higher level decision making that went into it.
That's fantastic. So now we got about 10 more minutes, about 12:34. So let's talk about some of the harder topics, right? Let's talk about cost. That's on everybody's mind, right? So when we talk to small businesses, and we talk to probably about 50 to 60 small businesses a month, right? I'll work with Joe, I'll work with a lot of other MEPs across the United States, and just general small businesses coming to us. They like, the program, the intentionality behind the program that the DoD has put forward, but they get really upset about the cost, right? They're like, man, this is freaking expensive. Do I even want to do this? And that's that's, like we said, it's a business decision. But what can you share us about how expensive was this? Any information you can share, Jayme, whatever you feel comfortable with in terms of what the cost of this thing was and might be in the future.
Sure. I think it's important to point out that we might be unique in the fact that we had already invested in a lot of the IT costs that maybe would normally come for companies after they started this journey. We had already made the decision to do the cloud-based ERP and then the cloud-based quoting system. And again, those costs are so highly dependent on the individual businesses, how many users and that kind of stuff. But that cost we had already assumed, and that was just part of our operating procedures already. When we started looking at the government's predictions for what it would cost to put CMMC to place, and I think it was around $60,000 to implement it at the time that we were learning about this. That's definitely a big hurdle to overcome when you're looking at investing that much money. But for us, when we looked at our customer base and how we wanted to grow, we were going to lose a lot more than $60,000 if we didn't start the CMMC journey. So you just have to run the numbers, and we were just going to potentially lose too much business by not doing it. And then certainly we weren't going to be able to gain a lot of new business. So far, the main cost for us has been working with Magnet and Ignyte to get the policies in place and do kind of the paperwork side of things. We are just moving into the technology kind of correction or remediation stage where we're going to start making some of those changes. And we anticipate that we're going to need to look at things, possibly new laptops or tablets for our guys out on the floor so that they can not use their cell phones and those kind of things. But we're anticipating having maybe another, I don't know, $10,000 or so in costs to implement some technology side of things. Magnet and Ignyte have been great to work with, and we were able to get some resources for Magnet to help us through this process as well. And those resources are out there if you call enough people and you find the right group to work with you, whether it's the learning side of things and the training, or even maybe some grants and stuff like that.
So Jayme, thank you transparently for sharing that, because I think that's on a lot of people's mind, right? Just the numbers. So one thing I want to comment about for anybody that's listening in on the cost, the numbers that Jayme mentioned, she mentioned something around $60,000, right? So one of the things that we often share with a lot of leaders is, hey, before government publishes some sort of law, they're supposed to do some sort of an economical study. That economical study shows how much is this going to cost the entire business or the population that has to comply with this new legal requirement. So the Defense Industrial Base study that was conducted, the results of that have been posted on one of the federal websites. We can send you that if you need it. But one of the key things to know is that what the U.S. government considers small is actually like up to, don't quote me on this, but they usually mean 500 million and below in revenues, right? And a lot of businesses that we talk to are much less than that. So your numbers could vary, but the government is supposed to do this sort of analysis, but they rarely do a good analysis for what I would consider small and micro businesses, right? Anybody from 0 to 100 people. Those are micro businesses from the perspective of the government. So definitely, looking at the cost, the program management side is critical. That's going to help you manage the cost from the technology side. And really, as Jayme mentioned, looking at it from a business standpoint, you've got to, I love your quote, Jayme, you said you got to run the numbers, right? You can't make any of these decisions in silos. So the next thing I want to talk about for about 5 minutes is around importance of defense business to your overall strategy, right? Because you've got the cost, and now you said, well, I made the investment. It's a big number. I made the investment, but it lines up with your business strategy. So tell us a little bit about how Magnet is helping you with some of the grants and resources. What kind of business development opportunities you're able to seek after going through this process, and just give us a little bit of insight into, as much as you're comfortable with, your business defense side of the house, the strategy. How is this impacting it? And then tell us a little bit about your business strategy in consideration with DoD.
Well, sure. So I mentioned before that we have done some very limited DoD work before. As a very small company, it's certainly doable. It's very, very paperwork intensive. And we just weren't sure that we wanted to pursue that to make that a larger part of our business at the time. What we did find is that we had a lot of luck with working with primes. We enjoyed the type of work that we could do for the DoD. And it was easier we would be a micro business. There's less than 10 of us here. It would be easier to work directly with a prime instead of directly with the government, because they had the resources to really take care of the paperwork side of things and invest that time and effort, where we could do what we do best, which is making complex parts. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do. That's what we want to spend our time on. So by working with Magnet and our PTACs, we were able to really narrow down kind of what the best fit for us was. And I think that's important. Some companies are great at working straight with the government. Some people are great at working with a prime or even a subprime. It's really important to figure out where are your talents and what do you do best as a business. So that's what we've geared up for. We want to get as much DoD work as we can. We would prefer to work with some large primes. We need to be on the forefront of technology to be able to do that. We need to do our machining well. So we've got the latest technology on our shop floor with the Citizen Swiss machines and low frequency vibration technology. I mean, it's the latest thing out. When we look at technology on the office side, it is our cloud-based systems that allow us to react very quickly. I can work from home any day of the week now with the COVID problems that we're having. And then obviously the CMMC side would be what we need to do to protect ourselves and also to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements of the DoD work. So, you know, they just all rolled together in a real nice package for us.
That's fantastic. The good news is there are some primes that are listening in. So they're always looking for kind of early adopters, people that are leaning forward, because ultimately they have to respond to the DoD, and then you've got to respond as a flow down, right? So you're recognizing the importance of that, not only that industry, but importance of all of the flow downs and getting ahead of that. If you're making the investment, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable making an investment in you, right? Working with you as a business partner. So kudos to you in terms of doing that. So we've got about 2 to 3 more minutes. I think what we'll do, Jayme, is take a look at some of the questions that have came in and see if we can answer some of those questions. So some of these questions, I believe, Jayme, are addressed right to you. And then if you're listening in, we've got a lot of participants. It's a very comfortable conversation. So please, anything's on the table, send out some of your questionnaires and we'll facilitate and try to answer some of these questions. So Jayme, one of the questions here is asked by Steve: is Midway going through, or CMMC level 3? What level are you going through for your program, Jayme?
Sure. Yeah, we chose CMMC level 3. Levels 1 and 2 were not getting what we needed. So we chose level 3. That seems to be a landing spot for most of the small companies that we've talked to and other people that we've really asked questions to.
That's one of the advice that we give often, is that currently the accreditation body has really focused their attention on 2 different levels. There's level 1, which has the test cases, then there's level 3. Well, what happens to level 2 and 4 and 5, right? So when we work with the government on other standards like FedRAMP, which is another very complex standard, there's always an explicit requirement and then there's an implicit requirement. Here, majority of the companies, Steve, that we're seeing are positioning for level 3 because that's what's being implied. People are asking about it because it's in the Federal Register for 800-171, and all of those things line up with level 3. And so if you're serious about defense business, what Jayme here is very serious about it, hired sales team, investing on that side of the house, level 3 is something we actually advise her on, but certainly independent research shows very similar results. Fantastic. So the next question is from somebody named Connor. You mentioned these changes allowed you to streamline your processes and made things a little bit more efficient. Are there any specific systems that helped you streamline some of these areas?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I'd love to give them a plug here because they've done great for us. So we, prior to going on the cloud, we had been using a company called ShopTech E2. They specialize in working with small job shops. They recently got bought out by ECI. So I think it's now they call themselves Job Boss 2 or something like that as the platform. And they've been great to work with, both prior to and after the sale. It's just a dream to work with them. It makes everything so easy. And they, especially the cloud-based, because now it's a cloud-based system, they're constantly updating, upgrading, and making changes to the system based on what their customers want and ask for. So it's really been great. From the quoting standpoint, we used it was a smaller company at the time called Paperless Parts. And they were specifically geared to working with companies that were working with ITAR type parts so that you had the cybersecurity you needed. These two companies are eventually going to be able to talk to each other as well. So we're going to be able to integrate these two programs to talk to each other, which will streamline even further our capabilities here. But they've both been great for us, and they've made my job easy when it comes to IT anyways.
Jayme, thank you for sharing that. So Connor, that's what it is, sir. And you know, one of the things I will add on to, ERP is a big part of all manufacturers. It doesn't matter the size. ERP is very important to understand cost of goods sold and just the workflow of everything. It's also important from a CMMC perspective. That's where most of your data that we call FCI, federal contract information, may live. You may not have any CUI, you may not have any designs, but you're going to get quotes tied to some big giant contract, right? So really aligning your ERP solution to the CMMC strategy is going to be the key, because as an auditor, I'll tell you, if you're trying to design a system that doesn't include your core business, it's kind of like saying, look here, not there, right? And from an audit perspective, the risk really lives in your core business systems or your core technology team. So getting some of those questions out to, it doesn't matter who you go with. We work with a lot of different ERP vendors, but asking them those very specific questions around just efficiency, streamlining, integration, as Jayme mentioned, these two things are going to be connected together, are going to be very critical. Jayme, anything you can add to in terms of how to vet some of these technologies out for this purpose?
Well, and you know, I was going to add too, when you're looking at your ERP, I went through a bunch of trainings when we were deciding on which ERP to go with. And there's been a lot of studies done, but what they found is even with the best ERP, there's a large percentage of your work that is done outside of that. People still using spreadsheets or, you know, different databases and stuff like that, or things that they develop on their own because their ERP just can't quite capture it all. So when we were looking at what we were doing with our ERP, what we noticed was there were things that we were doing outside of that. And so we needed to, you know, bring that back into our ERP. So you definitely want to look at what do these ERPs offer and how much of your business can it capture? Most of them, it's not going to be 100%. If you're lucky, it's probably going to be between 75 and 85% of your core business will be captured in your ERP system. There's always going to be somebody outside of that doing something. But when we were looking at it from a CMMC standpoint, what we wanted to make sure is anything that was that needed to be protected could be captured and integrated in our ERP and our quoting software, so that we didn't have people doing stuff outside of that.
Fantastic. We've got one more question, and then after that, I'll share my screen and I'm going to share some additional resources, then we'll close up here. Okay. So the last question is around this, and answer as best as you can, as much comfort you have, but I think you've answered this along the way. How sophisticated are your IT systems before CMMC, and what are some of the IT changes that you're projecting, because you mentioned you're getting into the technology side in order to become, you know, journey towards compliant, right? So give us a little bit of insight about that, because one of the audience has asked around this question.
Sure. I would say we were pretty unsophisticated pre-CMMC, pre that journey. I would even say that now we're not that sophisticated. We have just really worked with programs that work well for us, and they make it easy. What we are moving towards, though, is more of this machine shop that just has technology integrated everywhere. The next stage we would like would be to have like tracking at the machines and you know, that stuff reporting back into our ERP, so we can just, you know, at any time click on a button and know how many parts has that machine, you know, done in the last hour, the last night, whatever. So we anticipate getting a little more tech heavy with that kind of stuff, because anytime you add technology, then you have to add safety and security features with it as well. So
Jayme, thank you so much for that. It sounds like your environment is simple, but it's also a little bit future proof, because I mean, connecting things into the machine I know State was talking about, IoTs and all sorts of other considerations that are going to come into the play. But it sounds like from a technology standpoint, as a CEO, you've made a lot of good CIO level decisions, right, in order to enable that. So with that, Jayme, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you so much for everybody that's listening in. The last thing we're going to share with you is where can you get some of this training? So in addition to just general training, we try to do one webinar a month. Last 2-3 webinars have been really about the subject matter. What is CMMC? What are some of these families in CMMC, access control, so on and so forth? How does it impact the supply chain? This month, we wanted to change it up. We wanted to get a kind of a practical, pragmatic approach that a CEO may take to do this. So here are some training that's available for you in terms of where to go. So one of the areas that I encourage you to kind of take a look at is there's a DoD website out there called Security Hub. We'll send you the link. It tells you what CUI is and it shows you how to mark it properly. It's not a training that's offered by Ignyte, but it is an offer. It is an offer by U.S. government, and it's completely free to you. The other thing we encourage you to go out is just kind of look at the Ignyte Institute. It's a resource for all small businesses. It has a practitioner course, but also top level management training just for about 15 minutes. Gets kind of bottom line up front, the impact of CMMC on their business. And then the other course is more for if you're in quality management, procurement, you want to dive a little bit to the next level of detail. These things are provided to you. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Joe and Jayme Dixon to close it out for us. You may hear from me, you may hear from Justice, and also somebody named Joe Vinciquera reach out to you. But if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Again, thank you for attending. Jayme, Joe, back over to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Max, and thank you, Jayme we got two Jaymes here. So Jayme from Midway Swiss Turn, and thank you everybody who participated in the webinar. You can see here on this slide, if you are interested in more information, you could either contact Justice directly at Ignyte or myself. My email's right there. And I think Jayme Dixon, can you please confirm that we're gonna send out the slide deck to everybody?
Yes, correct. We'll send out the slide deck and a link to the presentation itself.
Excellent.
Today's webinar, I'm sorry.
Yes, and if you go to Magnet's website, you could also, there's links in a page that deals with Ignyte, and you can also find all of my contact information right on the Magnet website, manufacturingsuccess.org. And I look forward to hearing from anybody who wants to talk more. We could set up individual meetings with Max and his team, and we'll kind of start where Jayme was. I don't know, what do you think, Jayme, 4 or 5 months ago, right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yes, and so a special thank you to Jayme for all the kind words you said about Magnet and working with Magnet. We appreciate that very much.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you everybody for joining the webinar.
All right, thank you. All right, bye.